Good afternoon, Kandas. It's really nice of you to join us here. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you're involved with the citrus industry.
Thank you. So I'm Kandas Cloete. I work for the Bureau for Food and Agricultural Policy, BFAP in short, and we've got our offices in Pretoria. And I am lucky enough to work from Mauritius. So
From Mauritius.
yes, I'm based in Mauritius.
Okay.
But my involvement in the citrus industry, so I'm an agricultural economist, working primarily in fruit, nuts, wine, those kind of crops. So my involvement in the citrus industry came, I think, with the agricultural master plan 2020. We did quite a bit of work for the citrus industry, and then after that, we became involved with a number of other projects, directly with CGA, and then after that with CRI.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I think what the kind of service that you're offering on the economic side of agriculture is so important. I mean, looking from the outside in, people often think of farming as, oh, they're just farmers, but it's actually a very important thing to see a farm as a business and how carefully one has to work at actually making sure that it is financially viable. People talk about being, viable and sustainable and all of that. It can't be sustainable unless it's economically sustainable. So,
And that's why we are here, because CRI requested that we have this conversation with you
Cool.
about your presentation, and we did listen to it. So we've got lots of questions.
Shoot.
okay. So I think the first question is, tell us about the name of your presentation and what the main focus of it is.
And if you can sum it up maybe in a better pitch, 30 seconds.
No pressure. No pressure.
Because we've listened to it, but we don't know who's going to be listening to this, and they might not have heard your presentation. We've got given it, so we'll probably put it into the link some way. So, but if you can just as brief as possible,
Sure.
because it was very informative.
Thank you. So the presentation was on sustainability in terms of profitable citrus production. So sustainability generally can mean environmentally sustainable or socially sustainable, or at the end of the day financially sustainable, and that's the part that I like to focus on. And so the focus here was what drives our profit, and what's eating into our margins.
So if you are standing with a random group of strangers, and they ask you this question, and then they say, well, what was your outcome? What did you find? What was that? Grow more, pack less, grow more. What is the...
What's the gist of it?
Yes.
What do you need to get right?
Yes.
You need to get the right number of cartons per hectare, and you need to get the right price per hectare. That's the most important factors, and that's driven by quality. So cost is important, but cost is a subset of what you're producing. So if you're going to produce 3,000 cartons per hectare, that's going to mean that you're going to have to pick and pack all those cartons. So of course then your cost will be more than somebody who only has 1,000 cartons per hectare. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting it right in terms of your number of cartons and your price. And your price is then to a large extent driven by the counts, the size of the fruit, and if your pack outs at the end of the day.
So who determines that price that comes to the farm? Is it the exporter? Is it the market they sell to another side? Who determines that cost of the carton? Because like you said, there are people that produce that was like within either 20 hectares or 2 hectares or 20 boxes different, yet the ones earn a significant amount of money more than the other.
Yes.
So what determines that the price that is being paid for?
So there's a number of factors. First of all, the market in which you sell to. So that would be, for example, we get a premium for a product into the US, as it stands. Now with tariffs and all those kind of things, that might change. But we get a premium into the US. And then every other market, it's an open market system. So there's demand and supply, and there's different ways in which these products trade at the end of the day. So market plays a role. Then your cost in the chain, because we've looked at the number of, we sit with logistical challenges. That means you put your product for longer into the cold storage. It means that the shipping lines demand more money to ship your product from South Africa because they know they're going to get delayed in the port. Those kind of charges add to the cost in the chain. So that brings us from the market price back to I would say the price in South Africa. And then there's also these costs, like how far are you from the port? How expensive is it to pack your product? In what kind of box do you put it? And that gets you to farm gate price. Farm gate price at the end of the day is the thing that that you have as a producer available to pay your production cost.
And what percentage of that farm gate price ends up being profit? Because obviously then they've got to deduct the costs of the farm gate price and so forth and so forth. So in all the farmers that you use this in your study, what was the average actual physical profit that they made?
So profit varies quite substantially year to year. So I recently looked at around 6 years worth of data in the citrus industry, and we went through various periods. So 2018-19 was, there were some challenges in 2018. 2019 was okay. 2020 we did really well. That was COVID, so we had a weak exchange rate. We had and we also had good prices. Demand was high. 2021 logistical crisis started kicking in. Freight rates went up quite high. 2022 we had the fertilizer prices and chemical prices skyrocketing. We had suppressed demand in the market because of what was happening in Europe, and all those kind of things. So your farm gate price fluctuates quite a bit, and your production cost, of course, when there's like these outlier events, also gets affected quite a bit. I would say our profit at the moment is probably more at a normalized level, and that is, if you look at it at an industry level, we're back to normal levels where producers can sustain themselves and can be plot. And we already see that if we see, when you look at the budwood sales, there's an uptick. It did go down quite a bit, and now we're back to slightly better.
That's excellent. And what's interesting is that on top of that, realistically, a lot of growers actually have debt on their property as well. So the profit that you're getting is before they have to pay any debt that they owe to the banks or to the land bank or anything like that. So that is the picture, but then you don't know what their financial gearing is as well on top of that. So people have to look very carefully to balance all those sums.
So we recently did an analysis, what we call a stochastic analysis, which varies a couple of factors. It varies yield, it varies pack-out percentage, it varies prices, and then we take a base year. Say, for example, we get to a gross margin of around, I think it was about 76,000 rand a hectare on average for 2024 for the citrus industry. And then we say, but these things can vary. And in that calculation we did, we got to, around, probably in this past season, 10 to 12% of producers still didn't make money. About 25% or so made less money than what is required to find, if they were geared quite a bit and they had quite a bit of financial liabilities to pay. So about 65 or so percent perhaps made profit beyond, in excess of covering all the financial requirements. But that's just, for the season. But that portion of producers that sit with data that couldn't service this year, it remains a challenge. And I mean, it just makes it harder for them going forward.
Is this just what you saw in your study itself? And how many producers did you study?
So this is kind of two studies that I'm talking about. On the one side, we looked at 42 orange producers, and that was just looking then at, what drives profitability in that perspective. And then on the other hand, we looked at, the industry as a collective. So looking at, the total planted area, looking at prices, that was returns from market for all markets, all commodities. So in that sense, we probably got to, I would say, less. You often find that our study groups, where the guys participate in the study groups, is often your better producers. So your profit margins in these situations will be slightly higher than that we see in the industry as a collective.
So this study is done with the 42 brothers. Was done that just in 2024, or was it over a certain period?
So this was just a once off.
In 2024. So what percentage of impact on that profitability was the fact of the orange juice price?
So that plays a role, but if you look at, for example, the share of our total returns at farm gate that comes from other factors that's not exports, that's very small. So even in the 2024 season, where we had very high juice prices, that contributed not that much to our total profitability. It's just the fact that we get so much more returns from our exports. So typically we say, between 65 and 70% of product is exported, and between 92 and 95% of our revenue is generated from exports. So it's skewed quite a bit from this exports, even though the juice price did help us.
Okay.
So I have a question, and that is about quantity versus quality. It's always that push and pull between quantity and quality. In the graphs that you put up on the screen, you showed that there's a sweet spot for size of fruit. If you go from the very big to the very small, there's a sweet spot in the middle for all the commodities that you showed. So there's temptation for a farmer to leave everything on the tree and hope he's going to get the best, or to trim away the stuff that's outside the sweet spot, get rid of the stuff that's too big, get rid of the stuff that's too small, and focus on the stuff that's most profitable. What did you find when you looked at that?
And why we asked that is because, like I said, we asked the questions that I was scared to ask. Is that you will find people, they don't want to sound like they produce less than the neighbor. When they're in the jagveld somewhere, standing around a braai with a drink in hand, they don't want to sound like they did less than the friends.
So there's the quantity, but does the quantity bring in money? And does the quality, when you throw away the quantity, is the quality enough? Does it bring enough money? That's always the difficult question.
As an economist, I would say it depends.
On the one hand, and then on the other hand.
So it would depend on a number of factors. But what we did find in this study was that producers with the smaller fruit, so the higher accounts, the more fruit per box, the deviation from your ideal average fruit price per carton is more. So it's essentially you get less money for a smaller fruit than for a too big fruit. So ideally we would like to produce ideal fruit count, fruit that gets the best prices. But if you don't get that right, it's probably slightly better to have slightly bigger fruit rather than slightly smaller fruit. And so that study, the data that I showed there was for price per carton. But then we also 2 years ago we looked at what that means through the pack house and through the farm. So what was interesting, for example, if you have a lot of small fruit, your pack house will pack slightly slower. And if you just think about it, Each packer has 2 hands. They can fill a box. So to put 108 fruit in a box versus to put 68 fruit in a box, it's going to take you longer. So that pack line runs slower. At the end of the day, the pack house needs to cover their costs. So they're going to ask you more money for each kilogram over the line at the end of the day. Similar at farm level. So to have a picker pick fruit, you have one hand holding the fruit, one hand with the clippers, and it just takes so much longer to harvest small fruit. So you already get less money per carton for small fruit, and then you have additional cost in the chain. So definitely, if you don't hit the sweet spot in terms of the ideal fruit count, slightly bigger fruit is probably slightly better.
Plus, if you have a tree full of small fruit, they take the same amount of chemicals that you need to apply for heater pest or whatever the story is, which is goes on to something that's not worth it. And when you go into the pack house, you've also got waxing that goes onto it that will also take more chemical.
Absolutely. So yeah, it becomes producing smaller fruit becomes expensive more quickly.
Did you guys by any chance look at what could a grower do with too small fruit?
No, we haven't looked at that just yet. I guess there's certain markets that you get quite a good price. The example that they typically use is something like the UK with their school feeding program. So you get the smaller fruit that goes into the lunch boxes, those kind of things. I was in the Woolworths last week and I saw the small apples being in this little carry-on bag with marketed as put it in this in the school
Lunchbox.
in the lunchbox, which was quite interesting for me because then at least you get a decent return on a smaller fruit. But
Well, you would hope,
yeah,
because those people also know that they can buy the small fruit for less,
yes,
and then they market it as a premium product again,
yeah.
which could also happen.
Okay, so that is we spoke about the sweet spot, and now you've spoken about smaller fruit. So why don't we look at bigger fruit? Fruit that is bigger than the sweet spot. Why does it not earn well?
So it's all about consumer preference. So if we look at the citrus exports from South Africa in general, we can look at what class fruit and what count fruit goes into the different markets. And a market like Russia takes quite a bit of our bigger fruit, and then for example the EU prefers a slightly bigger fruit than, for example, the UK. So you need to understand what product you need to market in what market in order to get the most for that product, because you can sell the wrong product in the right market, or you can sell for example, if you were to sell a too big fruit in the EU, we'll get less money for it than if we would have sent that to Russia. So a lot of consumer preference, and also just general uptake of fruit. I think if there's, for example, in Russia, if you don't have availability from a number of other countries, so your competition on the market is less, and they've had anything that they that you are willing to sell to them.
Did you guys do studies on that particular markets, which markets like what fruit more, so that info can be conveyed back to the grower, saying that, okay, right, judging on your sizing and everything, you're going to have the ideal fruit for the UK, for instance, instead of them packing for Russia or packing for the US or wherever, and they're not sending the ideal fruit to that market. Is that kind of info available to them?
I would like to believe that the exporter communicates that through the pack house directly back to the producers. If the exporter is not communicating that, then we have a bigger problem on our hands.
It is in the exporter's best interest to communicate that, because if they're trying to market the wrong thing in the wrong place, they're also going to have a problem.
But also they get packaging, they get pre-orders.
Yes.
So they would also go to producers, say, can you pack a container of
Yes.
Nadorkots for wherever
Yes, of course.
Hex of
Those are programs that are
Yes.
programmed and people fill the program.
and then that grower goes and he packs, but is he packing the correct size for it? Is what he's going to be sending according to the program going to be what's going to be making him the most money?
It's a challenge because I would say, that's why we see this, your producers getting bigger, your exporters getting bigger, because now if you have 100 producers to select from, you can probably get the right fruit, given weather conditions and all these kind of things that affected volume and counts at farm level. So you have more options in order to make that program, packed for that program, and then you still need an alternative for the fruit that is not packed for the program. So there's always, even when you have all the fruit required for your program, you will always have other fruit that needs to be marketed well.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about how to maximize your income. And obviously that's the most important thing. But minimizing costs is also obviously very important. So what comments, what can you say about that?
I would say minimizing cost is a touchy subject for me, because for me it's not about minimizing cost, but it's about spending cost effectively.
Yes, indeed. Actually, that's what I mean to say.
So minimizing cost means you spend as little as possible and hope for the best in terms of income. What we've seen is that, rather spending a little bit more, the benefit on the income side is so much greater. So, obviously you don't want to spend triple the amount of money that what your neighbor does, except if you get triple the income from that. And so I would say production practices that leads to quality fruit, whatever that means in terms of spending on the right things for your area, given the pest pressure, given your weather conditions, given the cultivar that you work with, all those kind of things. It's very important for you to just spend cost effectively in order to get the quality fruit that will give you the right counts of the right product, that gives you the right number of cartons per hectare and the right price per carton.
Interesting.
It is very interesting. And, again, a lot of people are looking from the outside and don't realize how carefully farmers need to make their sons, and how just thinking you're going to pack the maximum that you can get off your trees could actually end you up in deep trouble because you're packing the wrong stuff.
But here's the question: if you yes, we've spoken at farming as businesses now. What should a farmer hire a CFO or a chartered accountant that can help him with these things? Because a lot of them have just got an agricultural degree. They went to study because their parents said to them, you must get something behind your name. So they come back to the farm and now they must run multi-million rand businesses. So what, from an economist point of view, what would you recommend should be the first thing that those people put into place to get these numbers sorted?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. You can have a in-house economist. You can have a in-house accountant. You can have just somebody with a love for numbers and figuring these things out. You can say, go to your pack house or go to your exporter and say, listen, do you guys have anybody that can help me understand my business better? And typically they would have, if you don't have somebody, and I understand that completely if you're a small farmer, you don't have the ability to hire somebody full time. Looking at then, partaking in study groups, it already gives you a lot of information back to the farm. But if you struggle to interpret that into meaningful outcomes of, I need to do this or that better, it's probably best to then focus a bit on casting the net a little bit wider and asking questions.
So if you were to give basic advice to a grower, just very basic advice, what would you say? And sometimes people can feel very at sea. They've got the farm, they've got everything, but now how to put it all together and where to put your finger against the pulse? What would you advise?
Do what you need to do in order to maximize the number of profitable export cartons. And get as much information as you need in order to get to that point.
Would you say it would a farmer should make a hard decision saying that any fruit below X size should just be cut and not even come into the pack house, or be cut off the trees? Do like a hard cull on those things.
So in terms of the the small fruit not going to the pack house, I think we need to understand how your cost chain works. So if you pay for each kilogram of fruit over the pack line, regardless of whether it ends up in a carton or not, you need to understand that whatever price was negotiated or agreed upon with the exporter, with the local market, with the juice factory, that cost of putting it over the line must be deducted. So if that was 3 Rand a kilogram, that's 3,000 Rand a ton. So if you were agreed 5,000 Rand a ton in the local market, that means you get net back to farm 2,000. So those kind of things, producers need to understand, what gets deducted in the chain in order to maximize the farm gate revenue. And then on the other hand, I'd say you work with, so it's managing that component, but also then understanding what I need to do at farm level. And as you said, when do I cull an orchard? I recently spoke to a producer in the KwaZulu-Natal region, and they've got cattle and sugarcane and citrus. And he asked me, like, how do I distribute my overheads between the different enterprises that I work with? And so in his instance, he says he uses, my own time, how do I put the number to each of the enterprises? And I think that's, for me as an economist, it's interesting, and I would try to work it down to the second decimal, even though it's probably not necessary or for everybody, feasible to do it like that. But I think to really understand, once you take it to the enterprise, you need to take it to the orchard, and you need to understand why is a certain orchard giving me pulling the whole room down or pulling the whole room up, and to focus instead of, I spoke to a producer just now. He said he comes from table grapes into citrus, and for him then, they would take money back to farm gate revenue profit to a per carton, per bunch, per grape, and we need to focus, move towards that direction in citrus as well.
Is there anything else? Is there anything else you want to share that you couldn't put into your 15 minutes on stage that you would like to share?
I do have a question.
Sure.
And that is, as you were saying, there's the cost of putting the citrus across the back line. There's the cost of the carton. If the cost of packing and the packaging material is going to be more than what you're going to really get in after you've paid for logistics and all of that, it sounds to me like that stuff the small fruit shouldn't actually even go to the pack house. I'm just breaking it down to the very basic here. So you need to think very carefully, are you going to recoup the costs of packing material, logistics, and all of that, and are you going to come out positive or negative, or should you just call that stuff and do it?
So I think it's a matter of managerial styles and what kind of decision making the producer, as in the owner of the farm versus the production manager, etc. have. Because if I'm a production manager and I don't have access to the information that each small fruit that you send to the pack house is giving us negative net returns back to farm. If that information is not relayed to me, then I'm not gonna make sure that I don't send it to a pack house. So I think it's about information in the chain. So for us, it's always interesting. You have money flowing in one direction and information flowing in another direction in the value chain, and to make sure that we get to a point where only the right fruit goes to the pack house. I like the way that they explain, in table grapes, they'd say, a pack house is not a hospital. So you need to make sure that what gets out of the vineyard into the crate, going into the pack house is pretty much ready for export. And I think looking at, for example, our in the citrus industry, we're looking at 65-70% export share. So in that sense, it still means that we have 30% of our product that is not suitable for export, which is totally fine. But that's at least, we send about 5% to the local market. So that other 25% ideally shouldn't go over the back line because it's costing us money.
So we sometimes, you speak to people in the agricultural sector, and in some industries they have, for the managers, they have what they call a boxy bonus, a bonus that they get paid per carton packed. But that is within the opposite direction. That's the quantity. Which, if you're going to get paid a bonus for quantity, are you really going to look that carefully at quality? That's always the difficult question.
Yeah. So I think there's incentives is always going to drive the practices, and we need to look at incentives that incentivizes profit maximization.
Yes, and then there are other people that do profit sharing, which is a different approach, and profit sharing also means loss sharing.
I think loss sharing is one of those tricky ones where, how do I build up? Because if you're a profit sharer at the end of the day, and it's just, if there's money left over, then you share, but if it becomes a loss sharing situation too, you're essentially a shareholder in the business, and I think that's perhaps not everybody's appetite to take on risk. So I do think that's very much what's your approach to risk. So do I want to be in an environment where I share in the upside and the downside, or do I prefer to be in a situation where if there's an up, I'm probably not going to get as much as the guy next to me, but I know that I'm also insured against coverage when there's a loss.
It's complicated. And it's interesting to think about the consequences of those different types of arrangements.
100%. So I think that's probably from a production manager perspective. If you're not you're entering an agreement to work in a certain farming enterprise, that's probably a discussion to have. Is what are you willing to offer? What am I willing to accept? And is this environment one where I can where what I'm measured against is what I can manage and have influence over at the end of the day?
I think we've exhausted our questions for you. Is there
For now.
For now, is there anything you'd like to conclude with, like a wrap up, like a message? I asked you about a message to grow, but is there anything that you haven't said that you'd like to add?
I would like to say that I only farm on paper. I'm an economist, so it's easy for me to say what you need to get right, and what was out there is often much more challenging than what I can comprehend on my end. So I think producers, being able to put something in a carton at the end of the day is quite amazing. But there's a lot of things we can focus on in terms of the small stuff that will make the industry more sustainable.
Thank you very much. You've really left us with some incredible food for thought and some things to focus on, and I think this can be of help to growers. Thank you so much, Kandas.
Most welcome.